Says the educator in the room. All right. I'll bring this November 8th, 2022 Special Board of Education meeting to order. Roll call.
Kate Thomas,
Here.
Troy Carr,
Here.
Deb Baker,
Here.
Jim Hansen is absent with notice, as is Clay Colomb. Jamie should be joining us, and Michael Berkland.
Here.
All right, so join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I need a motion for approval.
Make motion.
Second.
And we better do roll call on that one. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, on to items for discussion. First up, we have Human Resources, Gary Manuel. Oh. Oh, yeah, sure. I didn't know it was on, not on. Okay, you go first.
Thank you.
No, that's okay.
Thank you, President Thomas. Federal programs has many pieces, different things happening. And one of the things that we are focusing a lot of energy and effort to get information out to our schools is Sarah Zimmerman's office. And so we have asked her to present tonight. I am going to load that up.
President Thomas, if I may interrupt, Jamie has joined the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So that I could share my screen. That's the very last one. That's
No, yeah, that's where we get that reverb.
wait a second. What's happening here? I know, but I was. There we go.
Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you. My name is Sarah Zimmerman and my title in the district is Prevention Specialist. And I wear a lot of different hats in the district, but one of my roles is to coordinate our mental health crisis response team. This is my 5th year in the district and 4th year with that role within my job. So, all right, can we go to the next one, Nicole? Okay, so first I wanted to just talk more broadly about crisis response procedures within our district to kind of set that foundation before I go into the mental health crisis response piece. So there's several processes that are in place within our district. So we have what we call our crisis emergency management plans handbook that every school within our district has, and that's step-by-step instructions of how to handle crisis events that occur in the building. So that could be if there's a fire at a school, a bomb threat, tornado, serious injury of a student, all sorts of things. So each school has a booklet that they'll refer to in those times of crisis. And so that is something that's in place. I don't oversee that, but I wanted to let you know that that is a piece of crisis response. The middle circle is mental health crisis response and recovery. And that's really the piece where I get involved, and that's helping to support students at the time of a crisis or right after a crisis occurs to provide supports and offer referrals and those types of things to get students the support that they need. And then the last circle, I can't talk about crisis response without mentioning our community partnerships. Law enforcement in our buildings plays such a huge role, in helping to keep our kids in our buildings safe. And then we also have a partnership with Behavior Management Systems where they come and provide counseling within our buildings. That's only if parents and guardians give consent. It's just as though a student was going to an outside agency, but it really helps with for example, if a parent works and they can't go and pick their student up and take them to the appointment. And so after a crisis happens, if a student needs that counseling support, we've tried to reduce the barrier of transportation and getting kids during the day to those appointments by offering it at school. So those are the two pieces I wanted to mention for our community partners that really help us in these processes. Okay, next one. So for today, like I said, we're going to really focus on that middle circle, the mental health crisis response and recovery. So we're going to advance. So one thing I think and maybe goes without saying, but when people send their children to school, they expect that we'll be prepared. We'll do everything we can to prevent a crisis. And if a crisis happens, that we're going to do it, we'll be prepared to support students when it does happen. When we are prepared, it really mitigates the traumatic impact of an event on students. So if we're able to provide supports right away, we can really curb the long-term impacts and maybe see some students that are more impacted so that we can get them referred to community resources, as long as in conjunction with a parent or guardian. And just to mention that the needs of students and schools are unique. It's not the same as, say, a community crisis response. When we're working with youth, kids can sometimes have more heightened crisis reactions than, say, an adult to an event. And we know that when kids are exposed to traumatic events, there's all sorts of negative impacts that can happen. So that might be lower academic performance, health issues, mental health issues that might show up later on in life, substance use, those types of things. So if we can provide the support right away after a crisis happens, we're hoping that we can mitigate some of those negative outcomes that you can see when people are exposed to trauma. So, all right, next one. So my role is the district crisis team coordinator. And some of the things that I do is I coordinate our meetings with our team. And that basically is just to review crisis events, response, what we did well, where we can improve. I coordinate training for our team. And right now we're really focusing on having an evidence-based framework that we use to approach crisis response. And that way we have a uniform way that we handle it and make decisions. And so that we can say, this is how we made the decision. This is why certain students received that support, or one support or another, I've actually become a trainer in that model. It's called the Prepare model, so that we can continue to have capacity to train our staff. For example, if we get new school counselors or something that aren't trained, we can do that internally rather than sending them to a training somewhere. So our crisis team is made up of mostly school counselors, school psychologists, and school social workers. They volunteered to be part of this team because they're passionate about helping students in times of crisis. So it wasn't something where people are voluntold, to participate. This truly is it's the folks that show up when a crisis happens. They're there and they want to help and support. So it's not a large team. We have about 10 people that are kind of on our team that we meet with and are called upon when the need arises to help in buildings. And all of the people on the district crisis team are trained in our crisis response model, that Prepare model. And I did bring a book and a manual if you guys wanted to look at that and see more closely. And then the third column on here is, when am I called, or when is the district crisis team used? Typically, it happens when a crisis event occurs. And as you know, in a school, there's a lot of crisis that happens from very small to very large. And so typically it's when a crisis happens that has the capacity to really overwhelm the staff within the building. For example, if a school has one school counselor, a crisis occurs and they have a whole lot of kids that are impacted and they're like, I'm one person, you know, they might talk with their administrator and say, can we get some help, extra support in the building? We see at our larger high schools, they have a lot more counselors and support available in the school. So that's a time, sometimes a principal might just want to consult and talk through, like, this are the things I'm planning, you know, and just consult and have another opinion on crisis response. And so a few different reasons, but typically it's for those larger scale crisis events. So
Could you tell me really quick, what prepare stands for? Because there's a small a, or is that a typo?
I'm sorry.
Can you
say-
go back one? All trained in prepare.
It's an acronym.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
It looks weird. It's an acronym. So the prepare model. And so I could show, you want me to run this over and I'll show you? Real quick.
Yeah, sure. Right, that's,
But this is the.
oh, wow, that's a lot. That's why you didn't say it. It's not memorizing it. Prevent and prevent psychological trauma, reaffirm physical health, evaluate. Okay. Provide interventions. Oh, the small a is for and. Response to physical, psychological needs and examine the effectiveness of crisis prevention and intervention. Thank you.
All right, so the next one, I wanted to just quickly talk about small scale versus large scale. And I don't mean to downplay any traumatic event or crisis events, but when we talk about scale of crisis, we're usually talking about the quantity of students that are impacted. So there might be a very significant crisis event that impacts one student, but that's typically handled in the building, maybe with the school counselor. For example, if a student was removed from their home and placed in foster care, that's not going to be something that they call in a big district team to help with response, because it's a very huge incident, but it affects, you know, one student. And so we're going to be handling that differently. Large scale crisis typically involves a death of a student. And so that's a lot, most of the time when my team is called in is usually when there's a death of a student, because that impacts so many students. Mrs. Talley did ask me just to mention our Handle with Care partnership with law enforcement for those students that are exposed to trauma. We continue to, and is everyone familiar with that partnership? Okay, so we continue to do that when students are on scene at a potentially traumatic event. Our law enforcement partners will send a Handle with Care notice, no information other than the student's name, and saying, please just handle them extra cautiously today, handle them with care, so to speak. And so that the teacher and the people in the building that will interact with that student can, you know, just be aware that their behavior might show, it might be different than usual. And sometimes that comes with being emotional or ups and downs of emotion or shutting down and wanting to sleep, those types of things. So teachers know something's happened, we're going to handle them with care. So.
And Sarah, could you share that we really also work to educate our staff to know that it's not, we absolutely do not go in and ask the child what happened. It is just a information for the staff to know and recognize that that child may need extra supports outside of the classroom. We may need to call in, you know, a counselor to help, but we are absolutely not to dig for information. And sometimes schools have reached out to Sarah and they will say, DSS contacted us today and we didn't get a Handle with Care notification. Handle with Care notifications come when law enforcement is involved in the situation. And sometimes those can happen outside of the realm of law enforcement. And so we did Sarah did some educating of principals just last week at a principals meeting where that question came up, and she explained to them again that that comes from law enforcement. And sometimes it can even be 24 hours behind because law enforcement has to write the report that would trigger the notification.
Mhm.
Is that, do I
Yeah.
have that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So if it happened right at like 5 a.m., that's not gonna come till the next day, because
Yeah.
just the timing of when they put it in, so, yeah. All right, so this one's a busy slide, and so I apologize for that, but we'll work through it. So I wanted to just talk about variation in crisis events. So for example, if a crisis event, we start at the very top, happens during a school day, we can use an example of, there's a report that there's a weapon, there's some concern that there's a threat to students. Principals are not going to call me at that moment, right? They're going to be using, I put EOP, our emergency operation plan, or our crisis emergency management plans book. They're going to go through that, and they're going to work with law enforcement partners, and they're going to ensure the security and safety of students in the building, right? They're not going to call me first. Mine is after the fact. Once they have the building secured and our students are safe physically, the building is safe, then we can look at how many students have been impacted by this. And I put the star there. If you look where the star is, that's at the point where the principal would say, you know, do we have the resources internally to handle the response, or do we need to call in for some extra support? If a crisis event happens outside of school hours, say a student dies outside of school hours, then the principal will make that decision and whether they call me or not. And it's up to them, because like I said, principals and schools are dealing with crisis events a lot. And so they determine if they have the resources or not in their building. And so then we go down to that evaluating psychological trauma. That's part of that long acronym in the book that I showed you. But that's one of the first steps that I can assist with, is really looking at how do we evaluate how many students are impacted, how many groups, and who needs what type of intervention. And so based on the framework that we use, it really helps identify groups and students, and then what level of intervention is needed. Tier 1 would be a service an intervention that's given to every student. For example, that might be if there's a death of a student, we might have a classroom script that is read so that every student in the building knows that a person in the building has died and where to get help. So we want to identify students that are impacted and give them support if they need it. A tier 2 intervention might be, for example, if a student passes away and they're part of an extracurricular group or a team or something, we might bring that group together to provide support because they all interacted with that student in the same way. So we'll assess what type of interventions need to be done, who needs to do that. And also I oftentimes will help with the script of what goes out, if it goes to families or to students, helping the administrators write that and the language for those notifications. So let's see, I think that's all for that side, but please ask questions if you have them. Tier 3 is really that referral level where it's outside the scope. So we're not providing any counseling in school. This is crisis intervention. And so this is really triage, screening, and referring. And so if we know that someone has existing mental health conditions, or if, for example, they're reacting in a way that's unsafe, they're cutting themselves, they're saying, I'm going to kill myself, we're immediately going to go to that triage, or the referral phase, tier 3, where we're referring them to community resources. It's far beyond our ability in a school to meet that need. For tier 1 and tier 2, we're providing information so students know where to go for support, and doing education. So we talk with students about the reactions that they're having or could experience, and really normalize that, because sometimes students will be very concerned, like, I can't sleep, I can't concentrate, and that's a normal reaction to a crisis event. So normalizing that, but then going one step further and saying, you know, if this continues on for a month and a half and you're still not able to come to school, or you're still regularly, or you're still not able to sleep, we need to talk with your parents and talk about some outside support in the community. So we kind of give them a timeline, because it can be very unsettling for students to feel like there's something wrong with me. I'm not feeling like myself, to help them see, no, this is a terrible crisis or tragedy, and what you're feeling is normal, even though it's not comfortable, that type of thing. So any question about those?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
I was at a building this week or last week, and they had 2 students that committed suicide that week. So is that something, especially for the students that were classmates of, is that something that's automatically done, or the principal would call you to say, this has happened and we need?
Typically with a suicide, I'm generally always called in to
Okay.
help with those types of interventions and responses, because that does have such a significant impact on so many students, especially just given our area where
Okay, yeah.
suicides impacted so many people. Mhm.
So it's more the building gets the counseling or the management, or just the classroom, or how did you determine?
We have to go through it case by case.
Okay.
I don't know a better way to say that, you
Sure, no,
know,
that's
because
fine.
we have to assess the situation and how many people are
No,
impacted.
yeah,
And so it really just, it depends on that meeting with the administrators and the people in the building, you know. We can't say cookie cutter every time
yeah,
it's
sure.
one way, you know,
Sure.
because it's just, it would be nice if we could say that, but we just can't. So,
And
yeah.
Sarah, can you share that BMS, if we have that tier 3
Mhm.
and it's a referral triage, do our students have to go and wait?
Oh, right. One of our, so if we're referring a student for an immediate evaluation, you know, for a mental health evaluation, we have that partnership with BMS where they come to our building, but they also have an agreement where if us during business or daytime hours, any of our students can walk in there and be seen, and it's free of charge. And that's really been a wonderful partnership with BMS to be able to say that, because some families, they get concerned if I want to get the support for my child, but what's the cost? You know, that can be a barrier. And so that's free of charge. And then in January, Wellfleet opened their adolescent crisis care center, and that's funded through a grant. And so that's also free of charge for students to utilize. And then there's always the emergency department at the hospital, but that has varied fees depending on insurance and that type of thing. So, yeah.
The BMS service is also available for employees if we would
Mhm.
have an immediate crisis and would need to seek assistance for an employee based on something. BMS gets them in immediately too. In fact, they take people, like supervisors will immediately go handle that. And that's daytime hours, Monday through Friday, but the Wellfully adolescent is 24/7 and students can stay there overnight. If there's a need, 48 hours, is that the goal still?
24 to 48, I can't,
Yeah.
don't quote me, but it's
Yeah,
short,
24
very
to,
short.
it's very short term, but 24 to 48 hours. And that is also free with the grant, and that has been a huge benefit to the district.
Mhm.
I have one more. I'm getting reports from parents that are saying their kids are reporting being fearful because they see teacher get hit or bit or whatever is happening. Is that something is that considered a crisis, or that again goes under a principal determines whether that rises to the level of calling you?
Right, and ultimately, it's always that, it's the administrator's decision, but typically I wouldn't be called in for that, but sometimes, you know, they'll consult with me on various things, so it depends.
Okay,
Yeah. So,
thank you.
and I see Jamie has her hand up too.
Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Sarah. I just had a couple questions. One was, I've gotten a couple of principals saying like the handle with care seems inconsistent when they talk to other principals. Like what's the process? How is that triggered? Like, is it an automated thing that happens with the police report? And so could there possibly be a glitch there? So that was my first question.
Sure, with Handle with Care, it doesn't automatically generate. So it is up to the police officer to actually go in, and not to get into the nitty gritty of their electronic system, but they put what they call a name note. So they go in and it's like a tag that will stay with the child's, it'll be attached to the child for, I think, 7 days. But they have to go in and enter the time and the date for that to generate. And so I know that the police department has worked very hard to get all of the new police officers trained in Handle with Care. And when Handle with Care was being launched, there was training done with every staff person at the police department, but they've been hiring new people. And so when one is missed, sometimes I'll get calls from the school and say, hey, it was missed. And so we're aware of that. And I followed up with the police department and they continue to do training, but I don't think that they hit every single time, you know, because they have to remember. And to be, is that?
Another thing is we have, at least one of our schools is based out of Meade County, and this system is different than the one Meade County has right now. So Meade County does not currently participate in Handle with Care, but they have a new sheriff coming in January. And this was explained at the principals meeting last week as well. And that new sheriff is going to push to get that implemented because of the success we've seen in Pennington County. So if that would be part of the issue there, Jamie, that would be based on a different system between the law enforcement agencies in Meade County and the law enforcement agencies in Pennington County. And that is, you know, an interesting part of having our district serve multiple counties. That is the case, but we're looking forward to working with Meade County as they begin that process.
Yes, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Jamie, I think that might be one school particularly has half in Meade County, half in Pennington. And so our agreement is really with Pennington County Sheriff and Rapid City Police Department. So yeah, that does contribute to inconsistencies, but we're hoping to address that. So Jamie, did you have another question?
I did. I had one more quick question. So like the access to Wellfleet and BMS is fantastic. How are we as a district disseminating or communicating that information? I mean, very thankfully, like my children have never needed it. But as a parent, I feel like, I'm not really sure like where I would have known that or where I would have looked for it. So just wondering like how we are communicating and disseminating that.
Yeah, and we've really just had that information provided to our counselors, social workers. I mean, our staff are aware of it. And so it's when they're working with a student in a crisis during the school day. And I haven't really distributed that widely, you know, to all parents. But I will say no student is going to go to a crisis appointment without their parent or guardian consenting. They're the ones that are generally going to pick them up and drive them. With the exception of if a student is at imminent risk, like we're afraid they're going to hurt themselves right then, law enforcement might take them in those situations. But parents our mental health staff, our counselors and social workers, when they're working with a student in crisis, they will talk with the parent or guardian about all of the options. And ultimately it's that parent or guardian's decision where they take the student when that's the referral.
And we would not have much control over where law enforcement decided to go. So law enforcement might utilize the emergency room. They might utilize Wellfleet if there's not a waiting time there, or they might utilize Arise Youth Center. Those would be some places that law enforcement would probably reach out to first, and not necessarily behavior management, because if they transport it to behavior management, they would have to stay there with the child.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and so for this slide, I just was gonna just highlight that we used this model, Prepare, because it was written by school psychologists for the purpose of use in schools. And so it's designed to be used by schools, because you go through other crisis response trainings and it's like, it might fit, but probably not. And so this model really fits within the schools. So. And then Mrs. Talley wanted me can you go to the next one? She wanted me to mention that within federal programs, just looking ahead at the future, Mrs. Talley, myself, Mrs. Christopher, we're working on we will begin work to rebrand the Whole Child Initiative. As strategic planning begins, we'd like to do that in conjunction with strategic planning. And that will be the well-rounded schools. And so she said she wanted you just to be aware that that's coming and that she'll provide an update after the start of the year. And then she just also wanted me to mention that we're continuing to use those Title IV dollars for conscious discipline, which really helps promote self-regulation and the ability to identify kind of what brain state kids are in and how to get themselves to a regulated state. And some of that is really helpful when we look at the tie between crisis, because they'll have some skills to help regulate their emotions. And hopefully we're bolstering resiliency in those times of crisis. So any other questions, you guys?
I wanted to add that that well-rounded retitling, that's coming out of the South Dakota Department of Education. So they're realigning that whole child initiative with a title of well-rounded schools. And that's one of the reasons we're making that shift there. And then that conscious discipline piece, we believe that PBIS and conscious discipline, Mr. Talley and I have been talking quite a bit about this, is we believe that can be beneficial to the schools to deal with some behavior issues. So he is focusing some work with various buildings on making sure that they are utilizing the training that has been given to them and purchased, and the information that has been sent out, that it hasn't got lost in the shuffle, but they're actually finding ways to positively recognize behavior as a modeling effort for other students for some lesser behavior issues. So that PBIS and then that conscious discipline, are we using it, administering it with fidelity? Are all of the buildings using it? Are there PBIS groups in buildings? And so he's been having conversations with various principals and staffs about that work as well. And I think that one thing that he has discovered is that as staffs if we have turnover in leadership and also in staffs, that we need to make the effort to ensure that we are continually training and bringing everybody up to speed. And this is something that I think we're very concerned about as a district, is sometimes we invest a whole bunch of time and energy into getting everybody trained in 1 year, and then we forget that not everybody stays. So we have to have that ongoing effort that we're continually making sure that everybody in a building is educated with the same information and able to provide the same options for students. So we are recognizing that need and moving forward with that as well.
So I want to make a comment. We used to have something called character counts, and that has data showing that it helps, just kind of like the same thing as teammates, where it has the positive feedback for good behavior without giving them a ticket or, that type of incentive, which may not always be there in their life, an object, or something to buy. Instead, the character counts. Yeah. It was more internal and praise for that person, so they felt better about themselves. Now, I know we kind of went away with it, but I've met with somebody who is well trained in the social emotional learning, but also did a lot of the work with the character counts. And this was a while ago, but she had said she could see how she could meld some of the good parts of the character counts in with this. You couldn't call it character counts, you'd call it something else, because you have to buy into the whole program in order to be, it's got rights to the word character counts, basically. But I would be interested in having the administration at least listen to kind of a plan that she has that might help with these behaviors, et cetera, that I think you're looking for as you're talking with Mr. Talley about that. So, yeah.
Thank you, President Thomas.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Sarah?
Are you done? Is that it? Okay? I don't see any other hands. No? All right. Well, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Have a good night.
Go ahead.
Now, President Thomas, we have Gary Manuel here. As I've introduced him in the past, he is our new Director of HR. And so I'm very thrilled that he has agreed to come and present. As you know, we've had a lot of shift and turnover in our HR department in the last year or so. And we've been doing a lot of meetings and a lot of conversation as Mr. Manuel gets up to speed and really works to unite that department. I know that you've also heard me say that, you know, there's been a lot of, when I came in, there was a lot of questions about the number of employees in HR. And I know you've heard me say that we historically had a very small, well-trained HR staff, and they could carry a lot of weight because they all were really experts. But as that staff has completely turned over, we have literally one employee that has been there for multiple years. So we've got a lot of employees really working hard to get trained and up to date, but their ability to carry the huge load that is HR has been reduced because there's a huge learning curve. And so, Gary, how many weeks are we at? 6, maybe? I don't know.
For me
Yes,
personally,
yeah, you personally.
2 months.
2 months. So
So 8 weeks.
8 weeks. And as you all know, Skyward in and of itself is a challenge. So I very much appreciate Gary coming in to present to you tonight.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. Sure.
Zoom again. Okay. Right there. Take that, click on that. Where'd we go?
It also looks like your computer isn't muted, but I'm not hearing any of the feedback that we normally do. And you would just mute it on the Zoom call itself.
It is muted.
Huh.
So we need your PowerPoint right here. Then we gotta hit share.
Yeah, it doesn't show it, but that's okay.
You know what? All right, so I think we're ready. Okay. Well, again, thank you for having me this evening. Tonight, I just wanted to cover some things about human resources. I'm basically going to start with an introduction of myself and my staff. We'll talk about human resources role and function. We'll talk about accomplishments, even though I've only been here for 8 weeks. I can proudly say we've got some accomplishments. And talk about some upcoming projects and tasks that are on the horizon. They're going to be very important for us as well. So a little bit about myself. My name is Gary Manuel, as in policy manual or manual labor. So I was predestined to work in human resources based on my last name. I've been called Mr. Manuel, Manvel, but I always just stick with Mr. Manuel. I don't like to correct people, so if they call me incorrectly, I just let it slide. I was born, raised, and resided north of Pittsburgh until November of 2017 when I moved out here to South Dakota. So yes, being north of Pittsburgh, I'm a Steelers fan, and yes, we are terrible this year. Growing up in the 70s when the Steelers were winning Super Bowls almost every year, it became pretty much expected that that's going to be the way it is for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, we all learn it's not that way. I can tell you I'm not a hardcore Steelers fan. I do show up for work on Mondays after they lose on Sundays. So I can tell by the looks that, you know, wonder what sport he played when he was in school. I played basketball from 5th grade through my senior year of college. Probably could have never guessed that by my stature, but I can tell you honestly, pretty much was the shortest player on my team every year from 5th grade all the way through college. I had a love and passion for it, and I learned very quickly that I was going to have to work hard playing, and it taught me a lot of great lessons. I had an opportunity in sixth grade. There was a gentleman who was a senior in a Division II college, lived right down the street from us, and my dad had asked him one day to take me to the gym and just put me through some paces. And so we went down to the YMCA, and he put me through about an hour and a half of a workout through different shooting drills, ball handling drills, what have you. And after about that hour and a half, my dad said, "Well, what do you think?" And young man looked at me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Manuel, are there any other sports you want to play?" So I was convinced at that point, if I was going to play basketball, I had to work really hard. I have a son in Pennsylvania, in Butler, PA, and a daughter in Wenatchee, Washington. My son is married, and my daughter is going to be getting married in October of next year. And lastly, I've worked in human resources for over 30 years. I'd like to say that in HR, I've seen just about everything, and I had to change that after my first 2 weeks here, but in a good way. So let me talk a little bit about my team, and I love referring to them as my team. Myself, obviously, director, 2 months in the position. Tammy Padconi, she's district receptionist. She's been in the position for 2 months, but she has 16 years within the district. Cindy Noble, who is acting as the interim HR manager. She's been in that position for 4 months, but again, 20 years in the district, vast majority of it in human resources, has been just an incredible resource for me over these 8 weeks. Ellen Larson, who is the payroll manager, 6th year in the position and 6th year within the district. Diane Donnell, payroll specialist, 4 months in the position and 6 years in the district. Cassie Hansen, payroll HR specialist, 13 months in the position, 13 months in the district. Rich Harming, HR generalist, 7 months in the position, 7 months with the district. Doug Riley, HR generalist, 8 months in the position and 8 months in the district. Kelly Renner, associate human resources generalist, 4 months in the position and 5 years in the district, which most all of those have been in human resources as well. Camille Morgan, recruiter, 4 months in the position, 4 months in the district. Allison Daney, benefits specialist, 9 months in the position and 9 months in the district. Pat Wiley, the rock of the department, subspecialist, 17 years in the position, 26 years within the district, has been another fantastic resource. Dr. Amber Tilburg, district nurse manager, 2 years, 2 months in the position and 2 years, 2 months in the district. And Satira Thompson, health services education, 15 months in the position, and she has 9 years in the district as well. I will say this about this group of individuals. They have experienced a lot of firsts in these last 9 months, and I'm going to be experiencing a lot of firsts. But I can honestly tell you the enthusiasm and the dedication that they have every day coming into work under these circumstances of really not knowing as much as they want to, because obviously just having been so new, but they are very, very hard workers, and I really appreciate them. And I really look forward to developing them even more as time goes on. So let's talk a little bit about the HR role and function, recruiting, staffing, and orientation onboarding. We currently have 119 positions open. Recent job fairs that Camille Morgan has gone to, Shadron College and USD for teacher job fairs. We will have a booth at the Lakota Nation Invitation, December 14th through 17th over at the monument as well. There is a job fair at Black Hills State University in March of 2023 that Camille will be attending, as well as the Rapid City Regional Job Fair, which will also be held in March of 2023. We've been advertising on Indeed recently, and I've had very good responses for a wide variety of the positions, not just teachers, but also paraprofessionals, bus drivers, warehouse, student nutrition. That has helped us a lot, I think, with exposure versus people just coming straight to our website for the school. Obviously, Indeed reaches a lot more people. And if somebody doesn't realize, for example, that we have student nutrition positions available and open, they will find that out on Indeed, and they may not have gone to our website directly. So compensation and benefits, our plan year for our benefits. Last week, the gentleman from Brown and Brown were here that gave a riveting presentation. It was riveting for me. I enjoy benefits, but our numbers show that we have, we're up 15 employees over last year for eligible enrollment. But ironically, our enrollment is down in the medical side for about 15%, and on the dental, 2% from last year. And so one of the things we wanted to kind of figure out was, why is that? What's happening that's causing a downturn on people enrolling in our benefits? And some of the things that we basically discussed and evaluated: one, retirements. As people retire from the district, obviously they're not going to carry our benefits. Some are opting to take their spouse's coverage. They may find that adding their spouse onto our coverage is a little bit more expensive than what they can get through their spouse's coverage. So that is certainly something that happens. A surprising one, we have 143 employees at age 25 and under that may be electing to stay on their parents' plan because their parents are paying for their benefits. Some unfortunately choose not to carry coverage, not obviously a very wise decision, but some feel that they may be healthy enough that they don't need it, not planning for potential emergencies. And then taking coverage through an alternate source such as healthcare.gov or something along that line. We've had recently some that were carrying their entire family and then elected to move them over to healthcare.gov plan. So their spouse and their children still had coverage, but just through the healthcare.gov site, they would maintain our coverage just for individuals. So their contribution amount would be much less than it would be if they were contributing for their entire family. Open enrollment for voluntary benefits is happening, just started yesterday, and will go through November 18th. And those are benefits such as voluntary life, short-term disability, critical illness, accident illness. Those premiums are 100% paid by the staff member. And those are becoming more and more popular with time going on, given family history with certain things and that type of thing. So Ellison informed me today after day one, they had 54 people enroll. So that's a pretty significant amount of people for just day one. So the Insurance Advisory Committee, we meet basically every month. We'll be skipping the month of December. But one of the things that we talk about, obviously, is our cash balance of our insurance fund. And a very, very sensitive topic was the employee benefit holiday, in which in the past, their deductions would be suppressed, say for the month of December. That was chosen simply because there are a variety of positions, paraprofessionals, I believe, do not work those last 2 weeks in December, so there is no paycheck coming in. And so by giving them a break on their benefit deduction, that is helpful to them. One of the other things that we're potentially going to research for next year is offering a vision plan to the staff of the district. And we'll look at different proposals. We'll look at 100% employee paid plans, and we'll look at plans that may have a very minimal contribution by the district. Obviously, compensation continues to be a factor in the district, particularly in recruiting and retention. As Mr. Telly says, we do not have a money orchard, nor do we even have a money tree necessarily, but is certainly one of the biggest challenges that I believe faces this district moving forward. And just a little bit about payroll. They process 84 payrolls every year, and approximately $91 million goes out in payroll. So obviously a very, very large expense. Ellen Larson and her group do a great job I learned a long time ago in human resources, the one thing you don't want to do is mess up somebody's pay. And they have done a very, very good job. Labor and employee relations, I've begun my I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
As the district struggles with compensation and what to do about it, if there is anything in your 30 years of experience. Oh, how do I ask the question? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are we in as far as crisis mode in our compensation with our competitors?
I'll preface the answer by telling you first, my 30 years have been in for-profit world, family-run businesses, nonprofits. So I will use that experience. I don't think that we're ready to hit the crisis button being a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. Compensation, obviously, in today's arena with inflation is certainly a big issue because obviously less buying power.
Yeah.
You know, but I think there's other factors that roll into there too. You know, at one time, I think school districts were viewed as, I'll work for less money because they have such fantastic benefits, and people were willing to do that. And I still think that's the case with some of our staff, is that, you know, they recognize that, you know, and the other part, honestly, and it may sound a little naive, some people don't get into education to get rich. They get into education because they have intrinsic rewards in teaching and contributing to the community and helping people. But ultimately, to answer your question, are we in a crisis mode? I don't know if I would describe it as a crisis mode. Is that on the horizon? If we have a lot of people leave us next year at the end of the school year, then we might be looking at a crisis because your staff numbers have dwindled significantly. And you're gonna need to not only can pay the ones that stay, but you're gonna have to have a reason to attract people to want to come and work.
And so that's kind of where I'm getting at, that then we need to be, since, you know, this Swigart loves my bumping the gums, you know, so we've been doing a lot of bumping the gum about knowing what the problem is. So with that information and what we already know and feel, then we really need to proactively do something numbers wise to be competitive, instead of just saying, oh man, you know, we should have done something last year. Well, it's your fault because you knew it this year. You know it's an issue. So okay, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Okay.
That we really need to be doing something sooner than later to address what we already know is going to be a potential crisis.
I think that's a very fair statement. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
And other districts are, you know, competing with us. So, you know, if they make a shift to do even more and we are behind them already, then we have to be very aware of that. And that is something that has become more and more obvious as I talk to other superintendents around the state, is they're making pretty significant moves or plans, and we need to be having conversations like that as well locally.
So for labor and employee relations, I've begun bi-weekly meetings with the RCEA reps, Stephanie and Sue, which are designed to discuss potential issues that can be resolved without escalating them. I'll be organizing the Professional Labor Management Committee, the PLMC, and establishing meeting schedules with those groups as well as we begin preparing to negotiate for the next contract. And then just a couple of items that I kind of anticipated as being hot topics in negotiations. Again, obviously compensation is going to be one of them. I think the number of staff openings that we have is going to potentially be a hot button, simply because when you are running short-staffed, you've got existing staff picking up a lot of the load, and that results potentially in burnout and people deciding maybe it's time for them to move on. And we certainly don't want that to happen. So again, to your point, we need to make action happen versus just talk about it.
Yep.
So. Organizational development and support. Basically, I just threw training under here. We do two types of training: supervisor trainings and employee trainings. Under supervisor trainings, the areas that I believe need to be focused on: progressive discipline, performance management, policies and procedures are important. Harassment in the workplace, employee rights, and believe it or not, interviewing skills, because it's been my experience that your staffing situation tends to reflect your interviewing skills of your hiring supervisors and managers. Are they doing a thorough job when they're interviewing candidates? Are they really finding out what these individuals' strengths are? What areas are they going to need to be improving in? Are they reliable? Are they dependable? Can they be trusted? Are they going to show up for work every day and work, or are they just going to show up for work every day and collect a paycheck? And interviewing is a skill. It takes time, it takes practice, and I believe that you can learn how to be a very, very good interviewer. It just takes time and the correct type of guidance. And I would like to believe that we could certainly provide that. For employees, one of the things that kind of stood out to me, and it's just very minor, I have a part of my background's in safety. The number of employees who don't know how to fill out an accident report. They just don't, they're not sure what to do or where they should fill in information. And that's critical, because if you're injured on the job, that's workers' compensation, and there's, those benefits in place. And in a vast majority of the injuries that I have seen, we've done claims review. I've been involved in claims review meetings since I've been here. Nothing really of major concern, but you still, as a district, want to make sure that your employees feel that they're getting a fair shake whenever they do get injured at work, whether it be a slip and fall somewhere, or a trip, or a student lashing out, throwing something at them, or hitting them, or what have you. And so I think that's important, because that will help educate employees to know that if something happens, these are the steps I need to take to make sure it's reported properly. And also, again, policies and procedures. Harassment in the workplace. We'd all like to think that adults in the workplace can behave, and sometimes they don't. But we need to make sure that people are educated properly in what to do and what not to do in employee rights and conflict resolution. Again, I'm a firm believer that if there's a conflict between two employees, it is up to them to resolve the conflict, not run it to human resources or not run it to their boss. And that's difficult for some individuals. I understand that. I appreciate that. And I get that. But at the end of the day, if you can resolve conflict between two employees, just between those two, I think you've made great strides. So to continue, advisory and counsel. Obviously in HR, we'll do some counseling on contracts and agreement and interpretation and policy interpretation. It's important because some people will read a policy and it's kind of funny that one person reads it one way, person reads it the other way. So we're there to kind of try to understand the intent of those things and be able to apply them fairly. Obviously, when it comes to employee discipline, supervisors not sure what to do or how they should handle it, we certainly will advise and counsel them there. And again, conflict management and resolution with a subordinate who may not either be performing or coming to work or acting inappropriately, we'll certainly advise and counsel on those things as well. We're there to coach and mentor supervisors, particularly new supervisors and young supervisors who may not have had that in their past. And then obviously talk about how to deal with employee performance issues. Again, if somebody is not performing, what do I do? What steps do I need to take, et cetera. Compliance plays a very large role in human resources, mandatory reports, the PRF, which was submitted to the state, EEO-5 report, state compensation survey, safe school trainings, ALIS training, benefits related compliance, 1095C forms, creditable coverage letters. Again, not the most exciting kind of things, but I can tell you firsthand, you don't do it, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt. And it's something as simple as just sending out a letter. And if it gets overlooked or forgotten, it can come back and bite you. Also, we want to make sure with teacher certifications, we play a role in that. And through Skyward, knowing which teachers are going to be up for recertification, communicating that with school principals so that they're aware of it. Data integrity in Skyward is paramount in human resources. The old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If we're not putting things in correctly as HR, it is not going to benefit us down the road when it comes to reports or doing analysis or anything like that. And so I've stressed very much with the HR generalist and anybody dealing with Skyward and inputting information to make sure, even if you need to have another set of eyes on it, to make sure, because if we don't have the time to do it right the first time, when are we going to find time to do it? And it's just paramount to have that information in there correct. And then Title IX training and compliance. I've begun Title IX training. We are utilizing a third party to conduct that. We will then begin finding and designating investigators and decision makers through that process as well, and get them fully trained and up and running as well, because again, that's a very large part in school districts' Title IX compliance. And then finally, work with departments district-wide as a business partner. Ensure that any and all HR-related topics are being addressed and handled. I view us as the key department of making everybody happy, but I also tell my team there are certain things that we can make people happy by teaching them how to do it and not having them rely solely on us how to do it all of the time. And that's a shift in culture, and that can happen, and it will happen eventually. But you know, sometimes it's easier for somebody to pick up a telephone and say, hey, versus getting on the employee portal and digging through a little bit and finding the answer on their own. But we're here to serve all of the staff and do whatever we can to make their positions and their careers enjoyable here. So just some accomplishments real quick. The state personnel record form was submitted on 10/31. Shout out to Rich and Doug and Cindy. They worked many hours on that. That is a key report that goes to the state for funding purposes. And it needs to be accurate. And they worked incredibly hard to get it to a very accurate level. They also worked on the state compensation survey and submitted it just a few days later. Progressive discipline toolkit training was conducted for principals in October. I conducted that training at a principals meeting. It was very rewarding. It was a refresher for some principals, and it was brand new for other principals. And progressive discipline, as I explained, is designed not as a termination tool, but it is designed as a rehabilitation tool for employees who may have just gotten off track and just need a reminder or a friendly pat on the back to say, come on, you're better than this. We know you're better than this, but I need to document it, because if it does get to the point where it does progress to getting worse and worse, then it has been documented and you can position yourself from a standpoint of if you terminate somebody. Also did that training for support services manager last week. We've advised and counseled various supervisors on many different HR topics just in these 2 months that I've been here. And certainly the most important and ongoing development of relationships with the Rapid City area school staff and personnel. So just some major upcoming projects and tasks. Number one for me, hiring a human resources manager. We got room for one more new person in the department. So this is a key hire and a critical hire in my mind, because this individual is going to play an integral role in the department. They're going to have 5 or 6 people reporting to them. They're going to be a large assistance to me. They're going to take things off of my plate that I'm currently doing right now and allow me to focus on more strategic types of things. So this is just a very critical position. I've interviewed 3 people for it so far. I have a 4th to be scheduled. And I will be honest, and I'm a very firm believer of this. I am not going to settle for a person. I am going to select the person that is best for that position. And that is just completely important to me to make sure I have that.
What happened? We
we lose
lost
somebody?
connection. I don't know what's going on here.
Where's my cursor? You want me to close this? Or?
No, if that's trying to connect to that. I don't know what's happening. He got kicked out of the Zoom. I don't know what happened. Oh, that's weird. Go back to your email and log back in. Oh. It kicked him out of the internet.
Oh, where?
Oh, no. Where's your little,
Say it was
your little bar, your little wheel settings? Your settings, do you know where that? Oh, right here. Click right there for me. Wi-Fi.
just,
Yeah, I'll try that one. Let's see. Sorry. Wi-Fi. It's-
Starting at page 20, read and mark. Agree or disagree, so, hold on. It starts with anything that's new. Oh. The blue ones aren't. We vote on those.
Yes,
Yep.
now we
Okay.
got it, so.
I was going to say I'm just a few slides left, but if
And I can send it to you.
I was going to say I can send it to you, Shirley, if you want to.
We got it. I apologize, but we did something and now when we move from room to room or it tries to connect in this building, we lose internet. So Shane's working on that for us. Yeah, there you go. We're on the head, but- Yes.
Okay, so sorry about that. So hiring HR manager, clearly very one of my top goals. Creating the school calendar for the 23-24 school year. Nicole and I met just a couple days ago, yesterday, and are starting that process. Again, a first for me. So I'll be relying on Nicole and a lot of staff to help me understand why we're doing some of the things. Pay for open sub positions, that was a policy that was adopted October 5th. Currently, right now, the work is being done on the back end of it with payroll and Skyward. The subs, the people that are filling the unfilled sub positions, they are documenting all their hours and those will be paid. But there's been a little bit of a delay with Skyward with some challenges in getting that set up, but it will eventually be able to be paid right through Skyward on a weekly basis. Sub-absent management software. Shirley, I'll be sending something to you tomorrow morning on that. Basically, it is a software that piggybacks onto absence management for substitutes. Right now, there's a lot of things being done manually that is just taking incredible amount of time of Pat Wiley for gathering subs hours and processing it for payroll. This software will basically reduce her payroll processing amount of time from 4 days to probably a couple of hours to a half a day or so. So it will be a big improvement. And then preparation, obviously, for the upcoming negotiations, which will be very big, and then also staffing budget for the upcoming year. Open enrollment, as I mentioned, is currently ongoing, and then Title IX training for myself and other staff members. So those are a lot of the things that are on my,
Deb has a question.
okay.
Title IX training, is that going to be for all the principals too?
You want to suggest or give our suggestion or idea?
So I think we've talked about it earlier this year, but the federal government came out with a new Title IX manual that is 730 some pages long. So making anybody an expert in that is very much challenging, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with a Title IX procedure team within the Rhapsody area school districts where, for instance, if we had a Title IX complaint at an elementary level, a high school or a middle school administrator would do the investigative work, and then we'd have a different decision maker. So there would not be any overlap or, any risk of predetermination. And then if something was at the high school level, an elementary administrator would do some of that work. We're going to first work on pushing it out to the activities directors, because originally that's where Title IX began, was in athletics. And then we're going to push it out to the assistant principals, training for them to be the investigators, and then we'll push it out a little bit further. But we really think that for a lot of expectations for administrators, the summer is the best time for them to do some training work. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but we feel really good about having a plan now.
And that's all I have, but thank you for listening and engaging in the presentation. Are there any other questions that I can answer?
Yes, go ahead.
So earlier you had mentioned the BHSU job fair. I just wanted to ask about, are we in communication with Oglala Lakota College at all?
I believe Camille has had contact with them.
Yes, and we are doing work with the Indian Education Office as well, especially for the Lakota immersion conversation there. There's another college on the reservation that I never pronounce it right, so I'm not even going to try. But we're working with them as well. Chadron, I mean, we're really trying to expand that, as we have talked about before. There were fewer special ed graduates in the state of South Dakota than Rapid City area schools needed to employ. So we have to really be aggressive in getting our name out there and doing recruiting. And I feel that Camille has been a very fantastic addition to the team up there in HR. And we are having a lot of conversations at this building and with principals about ways to get that out there. And our principal team has really stepped up or building people in this building, but as well as administrators have really stepped out to be present at events where we are holding recruiting. And that is a big shift. Instead of leaving it all up to the HR department, we have all recognized that if we don't get out, then it may be our building that has a lack of staff. So people are really stepping up and doing a lot of hard work on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I would like to leave a comment with you. That is the best understanding of the HR department I've ever had. I really
thank
do
you.
appreciate that. Was thorough. And it gave me a new perspective. You make me want to go visit that floor.
Well, thank you. And you're more than welcome to visit
Yes.
anytime.
Yes, okay, thank you
Absolutely.
very much. Great
Thank you.
presentation.
Great. Thank you.
All right. We will be going into executive session for SDCL 1-25-2.1. And I will need a motion.
Motion.
Yes. All righty. All those in, oh no, I've got Jamie on the line, so I need a roll call.
Kate,
Yes.
Troy, Deb, Jim. Oh, excuse me, Jamie
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Motion passes
All right.
5-0.
There will be no further action afterwards. Thank you.